¿Okay? Así que un poco, solo quería dar un panorama, un contexto, para entonces presentar lo que va a ser esta primera conferencia. Y para que nos presente a nuestros invitados, yo voy a llamar aquí a alguien que me enorgullece mucho haberla conocido y que realmente hicimos un clic inmediato, así que eso es fabuloso. Creo que ambas tenemos una misma misión, una misma mirada. Por un lado, yo atiendo el síntoma de las enfermedades y de la salud. Ella trabaja con el síntoma del hambre y la carencia y todo lo que tiene que ver con acceso. Pero sin duda estamos hablando de lo mismo, necesidad de nuestra gente. Así que con ustedes, Mary Jo Laborde, directora del Banco de Alimentos de Puerto Rico.
Hola, buenas tardes. Voy a hacer esto un poquito en Spanglish por Rayna. Me da mucha risa porque Gualberto hablaba de la capacidad y la magia que tiene Ángela de crear espacios y cómo hace estas cosas sin que uno se dé cuenta. Pues a mí me llamaron hace como 2 semanas, mira, queremos que vengas y presentes a nuestra primera oradora, pero da la magia que esta primera oradora viene del mundo de los bancos de alimentos y de atender situaciones muy parecidas a las que Puerto Rico está trabajando, y de repente ahora tenemos una nueva mejor amiga, así que gracias por esa magia de crear espacios para que las personas podamos conversar y crear soluciones a los problemas. Angie, Rayna, I was just saying that Angie has this magical power, you know, to put people together and without us even knowing, sitting us to talk, and all of a sudden we have had a 5-minute conversation about all the things that we can do together. So, like I said, mi nombre es Mary Jo Laborde, soy la directora ejecutiva del Banco de Alimentos. Quería presentarles en español primero a Rayna Andrews. Rayna viene del mundo del bancos de alimentos. Ella se unió a Domen como directora de programas filantrópicos por una organización que se llama Food for Health. Ella es embajadora de salud pública, y una de las cosas muy importantes que fue de las primeras personas que comenzó la conversación sobre la comida es medicina. Es un tema que en Puerto Rico está muy fuerte recientemente, pero es un tema que lleva conversándose muchos años y ella ha sido una de las pioneras en esto. Tiene un TED Talk al respecto, así que los invito a que la busquen y la escuchen. Es autora, activista, y con este nuevo cargo continúa su labor de cambiar la narrativa sobre la importancia de los alimentos como medicina. Ella viene del mundo de bancos de alimentos, como le mencionaba, y en ese mundo y en esa oportunidad se dio cuenta del cambio de conversación que tenemos que tener en Puerto Rico y en Estados Unidos, perdón, y en Puerto Rico también, de dar comida versus nutrir. Y en eso decidió irse por su cuenta y llevar este importante mensaje como consultora, autora, filántropa, y aquí quiero presentarlas con nosotros hoy. Rayna, I was saying that you're writer, author, activist, philanthropist. You have a TED Talk, and that, like me, you come from the food banking system, and as we were talking earlier, you working in that system, you realize the changes that need to happen so that we just feed people, but that we actually give them health and nutrition. So, sin mucho más, Rayna Andrews.
Buenos dias. You know what? I don't want to be beholden, so let me grab a microphone. Right, we're talking about food today, right? I like to say that food is akin to family, to tradition. Would you agree? Yes, yes. And so the title of my presentation is Nourishing Our Future, Nutrition Security as a Public Health Imperative. And I want to thank you for that introduction, and I want to kind of reintroduce myself as well. as she said, I'm a mother, I'm a wife, I'm a public health ambassador, an urban planner, a TEDx speaker, a children's book author. I wrote these cute little books about a 10-year-old girl who saves her 5th grade science class with kale. What 10-year-old doesn't love kale? None of them do. I'm also the host of Coffee Conversations with Scientists. The Medical College of Wisconsin does a monthly preview of the wonderful work that our scientists in the medical district are leading across the state. And I'm also a Biz Times hero, healthcare hero for the work that I've done in oncology. And so I want to get grounded. I want this to be interactive, okay? I'm not in a box. This isn't TV. So I'd like you to engage with me for just a moment. Will you engage with me? Yes, it's good practice, right? And so the picture to the top left is my grandmother. Her name was Blanche Madge Andrews. And I want to ask you all a question, if you can do a pair share really quickly. What is the fondest food memory? Right? What is the fondest food memory? And I said that food is that one thing that really connects us as people. It's communal. Oftentimes we eat for tradition. And when you think about what is your most fondest food memory, I would say growing up in New Orleans, my grandmother had a garden in our backyard. And she would grow okra, squash, zucchini, melitons. We also call them chayote, which we had some chayote soup last night. And so my grandmother was a registered dietitian nutritionist. And when I think about why am I so passionate about this, looking back and thinking back on it, my grandfather died at the age of 56. My uncle died at the age of 63. And my mother is extremely sick, and they are all dying or sickly due to hypertension and degrees of cardiovascular disease. Now, the reason why I mention this, that we eat for tradition, is that tradition often gives these warm feelings of connection to family and fond memories and just a space of warmth, right? But also, I challenge you to consider that eating for tradition could also be a consequence into many of our detriment. Can you see that? And so in 2016, I did a TEDx called Food Insecurity as a Public Health Concern. And in this talk, I was very much working for Feeding America Eastern Wisconsin. I oversaw external engagement across 2 food banks, managed 400 food pantries, meal programs, and shelters. And at the time, it was very transactional. Before this, we were talking about the complete transformation that food banking has taken. But over the last 10 years, it's been a journey, where food insecurity, by definition, is on a spectrum, and it's at the household level. And really briefly, it's did you have enough to eat in the last 12 months, and could you afford the food that you ate in the last 12 months? In the opening remarks, when you look at the level of poverty in Puerto Rico and the cost of goods, 20% what the United States pays, how do you really expect for people to survive and to make choices that really reflect their basic human needs, such as nutrition? And so in the United States today, more than 41 Americans face hunger. And 50% of the population, so if I said 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, is just a sick day away from being below the poverty limit. And what we consider the poverty limit in the United States is $27,000 for a family of 4. Do you get that? $27,000 for a family of 4. When you go to the grocery store, good luck buying your bare necessities for under $100 nowadays, right? And so as we talked about food insecurity in my TEDx, what we focused on is the them versus us. Why can't they just pick themselves up by their bootstraps? Well, let's think about this, right? In the story of Margot, I talk about the single mother with 3 children who's struggling to buy formula or diapers and put food on the table and keep a roof over her head, let alone hold down a job. I talk about Jose, who has odd and end jobs, and he's trying to figure out how to make ends meet, right? I talk about Maria, who is the senior who's trying to sort through her medication, keep a roof over her head, and have the adequate nutrition so that her chronic illness doesn't spiral out of control. And finally, Richard, a father, a husband, who's trying to figure out, I've got a degree, I'm out of work, but how do I make this work for my family and be that patriarch? And so in my TEDx, and I encourage you to view it, it's called Food Insecurity as a Public Health Concern. What I talked about is we've got to change the narrative from them to us. And the reason why is that we're all interconnected. One of the challenges in working in food banking is that we were just focused on food. It was very much pounds in, pounds out, getting it to our people. But in the opening remarks, the challenge with that is that it's not just about food. People don't just wake up hungry one day, right? It's systemic. And when you remove yourself from it and see that it's a system at play, you realize the real challenge and the real solution is focusing on more of an anti-poverty strategy. Whew, that's a bad word. People don't like to talk about anti-poverty, but when you name it for what it is, and at the very basic, people are not able to make their very basic needs meet. And so when I talk about getting out of your silo of just food, for example, it opens it up for us focusing on education, housing, healthcare, employment, and how all of these are a part of a wheel. So just imagine if a household needed these functions in order to be stabilized. Like you need food for nourishment, for you to think, for you to function on the job. You need housing for shelter, right? You need education for knowledge to accelerate and to advance in life. You need employment to have an income for your life to move forward and for your household to move forward so you wouldn't be beholden on social services. And so I would say these are the pillars that should truly be working together in concert. So you're each coming together, putting down your puzzle piece on the part of this problem that you solve, all being able to step back so that you can see the bigger picture clear. This is what I mean by working in concert. When we're focused and fighting for resources, where I'm in the food space, so I'm just going to feed people, the consequence of being limited to just focusing on feeding people is that you forget they also need housing. You forget that what you may be feeding them may be causing health disparities. You may be forgetting that education attainment is really important as a route to drawing people out of poverty. And so it's this vicious cycle, and if not disrupted, you have to be very intentional about collaborating for this collective impact. And so what I talk about in the TEDx is that in doing this in concert, you can go from feeding America, just focus on feeding, to truly nourishing. And what I mean by nourishing is that you focus not just on getting food to people who need it, you begin to look at a holistic approach on the impact that that food has on communities in need. And so let's talk about the future of nutrition security. How many of you right now are currently talking about nutrition security within your organizations? Okay, I'd say that's about 50% of the audience, which means that the other 50% you're at the right place at the right time. So the future of nutrition security. This definition isn't new, but it's recently been updated, and it's very similar to the Food Insecurity Index, where it's a spectrum on if you have high security or low security. And so nutrition security is really focused on access, availability, affordability of foods that promote well-being and health. If you notice, it's very different from the conversation of food insecurity. Food insecurity has just recently, within the last 5 years, been updated to talk about the health and well-being. But if you can see here, nutrition security is really focused on the well-being, the quality of life, vitality. And there's a difference between getting someone calories so that they can live and survive. You may get a chronic illness from it, rather than nutrition security, where you're focused on quality of life, well-being, vitality, ability to think, ability to perform in a global society. And so I put this up because when you look at it, 60% of Americans have at least one chronic disease. 60%, that's more than half of this auditorium. 85% of U.S. healthcare expenditures are spent on chronic disease. We spend trillions of dollars. 74% relative increase in diabetes prevalence depending on your income, and 87% of employers believe the cost of providing health benefits will become unsustainable in the next 5 to 10 years. That's 87%. How many of you are business owners or managers within your company? How many of you looked at the profit and loss statement and saw the increase for insurance coverage? Would you all agree that it's gone up significantly year after year? And so this nutrition security, as we talk about them versus us, if it's not you who's living with a chronic illness, it's going to hit you somewhere, somehow, and it's usually in your pocketbooks. And so the reason I talk about this is that the problem is that where I come from, and it's very much reflective here, 35% of the population's preventable disease causes death. In Wisconsin, 35% of the deaths are caused by some type of preventable diet-related disease, where 65% of the population are diagnosed with diabetes, prediabetes, yet to be diagnosed. And our social safety net, our health care, Medicaid, or we also call it Badger Care, we spend $1.15 billion with a B on those living with chronic illness. I'm talking about diabetes, hypertension, cardiovascular disease, and the reason why we focus on obesity is because obesity is a gateway to many of these chronic illnesses. So when I talked about the Food Insecurity Index, to your left, yes, it's to your left, where we say high, medium, low, low. In our neighborhood, we're in the 53212 district. That's where my company, Food for Health, is. And in that district, from one side of the neighborhood to the other side of the street, there's a 10-year life expectancy difference. And it's due to income, and it's due to the access of food. And so here, when you see very low, it means that they have a very low food insecurity rate. Do you guys do maps like this here? Not yet?
It has a lot to do with the census data, but not to this level.
So this was done by the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, my alma mater. And what they did was a point-in-time survey where we had volunteers go out to the community, do an assessment on who was identified as being food insecure, asking the two-part food insecurity questionnaire. Did you have enough food to eat in the last 12 months, and could you afford the food that you ate in the last 12 months? And what we identified is that low insecurity rate meant that they could not afford the food, nor can they access the food on their own. The consequence of this is that lower income communities are hit the hardest because they lack access to healthy food, because many of them are beholden to what they get from the food pantry and meal program, which is not usually what the food bank has to offer. The food bank usually offers the variety, and then the food bank distributes it to food pantries, meal programs, and shelters. They have the highest incident of chronic illness, so lower income populations are most likely to have some type of chronic disease, diabetes, hypertension, cardiovascular disease, and the inability to pay the health care bills that result in it. Do you see this vicious cycle? So when we constantly have this narrative that it's them versus us, how do you expect someone who doesn't have boots in the first place to pick themselves up by the straps? Think about that. And so I lead an organization. I'm the executive director of a charitable program called Food for Health. So we focus on preventing, managing, and reversing diet-related disease through our medically tailored meal program. We also have an employer benefit that focuses on employers and employee well-being through our medically tailored meal program. We are the only USDA certified facility focused on medically tailored meals in the country. We provide fresh, never frozen, and what we primarily focus on is dignity. We want to provide our lower income populations with the experience that other folks who have to pay for it couldn't afford. So our low-income populations right now, and I'll talk about the policy and what we're actively working through in order to have our meals reimbursed, because they're currently not, but we're beholden on philanthropy and doing demonstration projects. But to date, since 2020, we've had more than 400 people go through our program. And why it's so successful is that when you think about the health and well-being, the diet and lifestyle challenge, there are really 6 barriers to people experiencing complete health transformation that we've identified. One is access and cost. Many programs give you access, especially the feeding program. They'll give you a box of food, and it won't cost you anything, right? And so that's how generally a lot of the programs are. And how successful are those is that a lot of the folks who get the boxes will take out the food that they're not familiar with, those things that take too much time, those things that they don't think taste good, they'll put it to the side, and it'll end up being food waste. What we realize is that food that you give folks, it has to taste good. It has to save you time, especially if you're juggling multiple jobs or even children as women and men. You have to have education, so food literacy is a really big thing. And also you have to have support. It's like, what friend can I phone if I don't know what this is, or if I'm having heart palpitations, or if I don't know how to prepare something? So we look at time, taste, access, cost, education, support as those lifestyle challenges that have to be solved for with any diet-related food program. And so in 0.1 font, okay, you can see it bigger up here. So this is our health management continuum. So how do we do this? And so what we focus on is when program participants first come to us, we do an SDOH screening, a social determinants of health, to identify what barriers will get in the way of them fully participating in our 12-month program. Yes, I said our program is 12 months. And when you think about it, most reimbursement programs from insurance will reimburse you for 3 weeks up to 12 weeks. But to truly have that lifestyle change, you need at least 6 to 12 months. So our standard program is 12 months. We do the SDOH screening. We also do a biometric screening, which is almost like a health report card. So we do their BMI, we do their weight, we do their height, we do a full lipid panel, we do their glucose, their A1Cs. And so that serves as a health report card. So every time they visit, oh, by the way, they also get a health coach. So it's either a master's degree level health coach or a registered dietitian nutritionist. You're like, wow, this is really rich. It's high touch, it's integrative, and we really look at this as a health intervention. And so each week, for 15 to 30 minutes, each of our program participants has a dedicated health coach that they meet with. This is really the glue in the stickiness to our program, because it's like a social contract. It's one thing to have someone do their biometrics. It's another thing to have a partner, like a social agreement, saying that, listen, I realize that if I don't take care of my chronic disease, my diabetes, my hypertension, get my weight under control, that I'm going to end up in the grave. It's really understanding the severity of not taking care of your health and not paying attention to the foods that we put into our body and solely eating for tradition. It's really disrupting that narrative, and it takes time. So they meet 15 to 30 minutes a week with their registered dietitian nutritionist or their health coach, and they go over their health report card, and they set goals together. It's like, okay, all right, Rayna, so you got about 30 pounds to lose here, okay, to get to your ideal weight. You're battling diabetes. What can our goal be today? Can you walk at least to the end of your block? Can you at least transition from eating white rice this week to brown rice this week? Can you, so making small modifications. But the beauty of our program is that we have 10 meals tailored to their disease state delivered to their doorstep in reusable, recyclable bags. Everything that we provide our program participants is fresh, never frozen, delicious, and nutritious. And yes, this is a commercial. And so in these meals, what's great about it, and when we talk about dignity, is that we provide our program participants with choice. So they get to choose between breakfast, lunch, and dinner, 20 items, and out of those 20 items, they get to choose 10 that they want delivered to their doorstep every week. We also provide instruction. So all of this is supported on our app. And so in the app, it has their biometrics. It has where you can kind of take a picture of your food and keep a log. It also has classes, many classes that we've created, like how to eat the colors of the rainbow, how to use a knife properly, and things like that. We also have in-person classes that we call our B3, our Be Fit, our Be Fueled, and Be Focused. So it's hands-on cooking classes, hands-on fitness classes, hands-on lifestyle classes, and it's all intergenerational. And so with our program, this is some of the feedback that we've gotten. Like Carl, who is one of my favorites, he says, this program has been a lifesaver. I would not have survived COVID without the healthy meals and weekly calls. Participant is down 22 pounds and blood pressure continues to improve. John D., I personally know John. He says, meals are good. I enjoy trying the new and different meals. I like the menu variety. The program has taught me how to keep my portion size in check. It took a long time to sink in, but now it works for me. This will be a long-term lasting change. The participant is walking an hour daily. He walks by our office almost every day. He volunteers at our community cooking classes and fitness classes. This is an example how when you show people, let them taste how good healthy food can be, you give them the tools and you give them the support to try it and practice on their own, it becomes a muscle and a lifestyle change, which is what we're looking for. And so this is just, I'll speed through this, but this is an actual picture of our food. We have an international flair where when you talk about cultural sensitivity, we focus on trying new foods, but we start with relatable foods. So some may have lean chicken or salmon or shrimp, and you're like, oh, these are really posh foods, but we work to stimulate the local economy by working with the local farmers, local distributors, local wholesalers to encourage them to grow the produce because then we'll be their buyers. And so how it works is that we have our primary care providers, insurers, community-based organizations that refer program participants to us. And so our program participant will maintain the relationship with those outlets. And we have, on the health coach side, we provide the knowledge resources, the clinical services, and the dietitians that provide the medically tailored meals. And so this is just a map that shows how the relationship congeals. And so when you talk about policy, in Wisconsin, we don't have a waiver, an 1115 waiver. We don't have an in lieu of service like some of our neighboring states of California, North Carolina, Massachusetts, and in New York. And I bring these up because we are all a part of the National Food is Medicine Coalition. Have you heard of FIMIC? Yes. And so I was the one within our organization that led us through getting our National Food is Medicine Coalition designation that identifies us as a certified medically tailored meal provider. Why this is so significant is that, is this in point font? You guys can see this, yes. Is that this shows what an 1115 waiver and in lieu of service does. So an 1115 waiver is through Department of Health and Human Services, and what it allows organizations to do is to work with the local Medicaid department to allow for a waiver. So let's say if, I don't know, let's say if some states only allow for diabetes, for three weeks worth of meals, an 1115 waiver will allow for a longer extension of meals. In many states, you may have 3 weeks worth of meals here, you may have some nutrition coaching, but it's all pieced out. And what we're looking to do is in lieu of service that allows for our comprehensive, high-touch, integrative model that proves out these dietary solutions. What we're looking to do is to have that full program reimbursable. And so we're also working with the Harvard Center for Health Law and Policy, CHLP, and what they've done is a number of peer-reviewed studies, and as you can see, not only working with Food for Health, but also working with New York, North Carolina, Texas, a number of the other members across the country. What we've been able to demonstrate is better health outcomes, lower cost of care, improved patient satisfaction, net healthcare cost savings, retention, and better adherence to the care that's prescribed by doctors. And so, how can you be the change? I've said a lot today, but it's really not going to mean much if you sit here and say, oh, that's good, that's food for thought, and go about your day. I think this conference, this summit, is critical. It's the first of many conversations that'll be had, and I was hoping to just lay the groundwork of what's possible and what's happening in other communities. And so I want you to consider, how can you personally help promote nutrition security within your circles of influence? Your job is what you do, but your family, your networks, your social circles is who you are and who you influence every day. And so for the 50% of you who are like, oh, nutrition security really isn't a part of our conversation, as Angie said in the very beginning, we have varying definitions for food insecurity, nutrition insecurity, and the consequence of that is if you're not speaking the same language, if you don't have the same definition, you'll be going in disparate directions. And so in good intention to work together, naturally you'll begin to grow apart. And so I want to leave you with my top 5 must-reads. From a cultural sensitivity perspective, I'd highly recommend Black Food Matters, and it's this is all of these are also an audiobook. Black Food Matters talks about cultural sensitivity and how it shouldn't be just about equity. It should truly be about liberation. So when you talk about access to food, nutrition in certain communities, sometimes people don't realize that they're being served absolute garbage. Sometimes they don't realize that the food that they're eating is causing a chronic disease. Sometimes they don't realize that they deserve better than what they're getting. And so that's what Black Food Matters is about. Toxic Charity is about community inclusivity. How do you create citizen science groups? How do you get neighborhoods and community-based organizations to really take license over these projects and over their health and carry it through? The China study makes a great case on why we should be talking about nutrition security and how the food is killing us and the crisis around the world. Freedom Farmers Movement, I know this author. We actually went to Cuba together a few years ago. She talks about the agricultural movement across the country and how the local farmer movements are dying down. And from Angie's introduction, that seems to be the case here as well. And finally, one of my favorites of all time is Food Politics, how they spin what we eat. Like Burger King is healthy, said no one ever. Yes. So food politics really helps get to the root of some of the marketing and advertising that we see and the tricks that they play to get people to think that the foods that we're eating are actually good for us. And so finally, I want to leave you with this food for thought. A hero is someone who has given his or her life to something bigger than oneself. And in my TEDx, what I said is that as practitioners, whether you all are formally trained or not, we are all public health practitioners because in our leadership role, we have been given the license to stand on behalf of the public's health and well-being. And so in that, we have a social responsibility to put a stake in the ground and to be unwavering to that commitment to the community's health and well-being. And so thank you for your time today. Please stay in contact. I know we have some maybe questions if we have time.
Hi, thank you so much. Maybe you want to sit here and talk a little bit. That way you don't need to stand up. And what I'd like to start with a few questions, and that way I can give you all a little bit of time, to think about whether you have any questions for her. And I think we have some people who might be able to hand out a mic if you have any questions on both ends. En las esquinas hay micrófonos, así que si alguien tiene alguna pregunta, en confianza la hagan, pero in the meantime, I can start with one. We talked about access to food, you know, and versus feeding versus nourishing. And coming from food banking, I get this question a lot. There's a lot of dilemma in the food banking system and in the, what I hate to call this, the charitable food system. It's the name they use. I don't like it. I don't use it. It's the social food system where we support each other in feeding our communities. But it's about what happens when I receive donated food, right? And we distribute it to people who need it, and we don't control what we get. So this is a perfect timing. Last week we got loads of candy. Should we accept that or not? And we hear, my motto is always, I'm not the food police. But that goes against nutrition. What do we do with that? Are we the ones who can tell a child, you cannot have candy when I had it myself? Or why would my child have candy on Thanksgiving, but the child of my neighbor who's receiving food from a food bank cannot? How do you address that?
So, I've been in the food movement for 15 years. I worked for the food bank for 6 years, and this was a very big challenge that we have. And this is what I say the difference between being transactional and being relational. And there's an organization called Partnership for a Healthier America that helped us create nutritional guidelines. And those guidelines were like our North Star of what we'd accept and what we wouldn't accept. And we created our own standards. And we also worked with philanthropy to raise dollars to diversify the quality, quantity, and variety of the foods that we got into our food bank. And so once we had steadfast that we're not accepting candy, we're not accepting those sugary cereals if it was outside of our nutritional guidelines, then we weren't distributing it. And so since then, we've nearly doubled. Our food bank has doubled what we distribute in terms of quantity, and we have nutritional guidelines of what we'll receive. I think the old narrative is like you kind of get what you get, but you also have a social responsibility to the communities that you serve and the impact that your food distributing candy has.
Absolutely great. Great in that. Another thing that I was thinking about, and please feel free to, if anyone has any questions, someone. Tengo otro por aquí.
Gracias, Marillo. Tremenda pregunta que hiciste ahí, by the way. I'll say it in Spanish. And then, so la pregunta es qué dos retos de la parte de la dimensión cultural de este desafío Rayna nos puede compartir y que podemos aprender nosotros de eso. So what two challenges from the cultural aspect of making changes in our communities can you share, and what can we learn from that?
So what are two cultural challenges? I think the one that I've been harping on all day is that we oftentimes, from a cultural perspective, eat for tradition. And being Creole, so having African-American roots, eating a lot of pork, eating a lot of starches, eating a lot of overeating. And every family get-together is licensed for us to bring out all of those rich foods that make us feel comforted in some way. Unfortunately, that's not in moderation, and it's killing us. So I think from a cultural perspective, we want to be comforted. Life isn't easy. Life can be very challenging, and we look for that sensory of being comforted all the time, which is, I think, really perpetuating obesity and a lot of these diet-related diseases, is because we're constantly looking for that comfort. I think also from a cultural aspect is that I think as people of color, we're often over-surveyed, over-assessed, tested. And so when a program comes to help reverse or manage diet-related disease that's been uncontrolled up until this point, there's a lot of hesitation. And I think representation truly does matter. People who look like you, people who speak like you, being able to service this, I think is critically important. And oftentimes there's not that representation in the movement.
Absolutely. So a follow-up question to Alberto's. We talk about this and we imagine we're in a public sector and someone's going to say from the audience, the first thing they're going to say, wait a minute, you're saying my food is not good? O sea, lo que estamos diciendo, espérate, tú me estás diciendo que nuestra comida cultural no es buena para mí, que yo tengo que cambiar mi cultura culinaria. Do I have to change my culinary culture? What is your answer? What would be an answer to that question?
I would say yes and no. I think you can healthify everything. It's like in our Creole culture, it was notorious that every Monday we ate red beans and rice, okay? And so how do you do it? Instead of eating pork, let's have smoked turkey, okay? Instead of having white rice, it's hard to give up. We have brown rice, right? Instead of you having this really large bowl or plate, let's just try a saucer. And so it's introducing and trying new foods and giving them choices. We're not looking to take anything away from you. We're looking to make some adaptations to your life.
And sometimes that comfort food doesn't have to be everyday food.
Yes.
One of the things that you also talked about, and we talk about, access to agriculture, access to nutritious food, fresh fruits and vegetables. We hear that every day. But it's not only having access to those foods, it's learning how to cook them. Because what's the point of having plantains, which are great for you, but when you fry them, mash them, and fry them again, and make them into tostones, which are amazing, then all of a sudden that plantain is not as healthy, right? Yeah. how do we deal with that?
Yes. I think food literacy is a challenge around the world. It's like, so in my children's books, the reason why I wrote them is really for our son's generation to get rooted to the source of their food. And I do an exercise like, where do apples come from? Where do bananas come from? Where do pineapples come from? And when I say pineapples, even the adults get tricked. It's like, where do pineapples come from? And so I think food literacy is necessary to get adults and children rerouted to the source of our food, because where we come from is in growing our own food and having a rich agricultural background. And throughout generations, we've moved away from that. And so I'd say it's time to go back to our source. But there has to be some literacy around it. There has to be some intentionality around it, and there definitely has to be education around it.
One of the, and we have one question over here.
Sí, en español. Sí, bueno, buenos días. Mi nombre es el padre Enrique Camacho. Yo dirijo Catholic Charities aquí en Puerto Rico, Caritas de Puerto Rico. Y nosotros nos ha gustado mucho su presentación porque tenemos el deseo de montar próximamente un Healthy Choice Pantry. Y con más o menos la misma idea de tener servicios integrales de nutrición, ejercicios y recetas, ¿verdad? Con chef. Mi pregunta y lo que ha sido pues un poquito nuestra preocupación es si ustedes han tenido la experiencia que están haciendo un programa similar de que las personas realmente vienen, si realmente les interesa este tipo de servicio o realmente van a preferir ir a los pantries regulares donde comen Doritos y Kool-Aid y todas esas cosas, ¿no?
Padre, tenemos que hablar. Let me see if I can translate. Father, he heads Catholic Charities, Caritas in Puerto Rico, are in the process of establishing a healthy food pantry. And his question to you is, it's regarding the challenge of what has been your experience whether people want to come to a healthy food pantry when you can do, healthy food and cooking classes and all that versus going to the other type of food pantry when you can get Cheetos and Doritos and all of that. ¿Lo hice bien? Okay.
So the question is how to create a healthy food pantry?
What has been your experience with people wanting to come to a healthier food pantry where they don't have the Cheetos and the Doritos versus saying, yeah, I'm going to go to the other one that I like that,
Sure.
food better?
Yes, that's a great question. So it's like, how do you create the demand for these healthy foods anyway? And so my experience with the healthy food pantry is that it's not just a pantry. Those healthier food pantries, we refer to them as resource centers, because not only do you go there for food, the healthier, the good stuff, but we also have employment opportunities, resources for children. There's some of our healthier food pantries even have a children's nook where children go in and they play store and, how do you make healthier options? So I think a lot of this is looking upstream on how do we bring the entire family into that experience.
So making it not just about food. Hacerlo no solamente de que se trate de la comida que vas a comprar,
It's
sino
truly
la
a resource
experiencia.
center where, like, if they need transportation support, if they need help enrolling in the local university or school, if they need help, enrolling in insurance benefits, they can get all of that at the food pantry. And the good thing is through the power of collaboration and partnership, that it doesn't have to be the food pantry doing it. You can bring in your partners to actually do what they do and use your resource center or your food pantry as that centering place to do that.
Sí.
I'll start in English and then I'll try to make it in Spanish. My name is Sonia Matos. I work for USDA Rural Development, in specific a pilot program here in Puerto Rico that it is called the Rural Partners Network. We work with distressed communities in the rural areas, and we provide technical assistance and capacity building for them. And in almost all the communities we are working with, they want to do a food pantry. But what they're talking about, and we do have resources with our partners in USDA, is receiving these donations that we know they're not going to be healthy. Besides our partners in USDA, which other organizations do you recommend, especially you here in Puerto Rico, which other organizations do you recommend that we should address them for?
It's for her, right?
both of you. I'm glad to receive any recommendation.
Well, you know, it's really funny because more than 40% of the food that we receive at the food bank, y más del 40% de la comida que recibimos el Banco de Alimentos de Puerto Rico es producto fresco, it's fresh produce. And a lot of it's from, you know, we work together with the USDA and our TFAP program. They're amazing partners, and the switch to fresh foods has been incredible. Así que con ese cambio, como el 50% ahora, más recientemente, es la comida fresca. ¿Cuánto de esa comida nosotros tenemos que literalmente empujar por la puerta versus la que se quieren llevar? Esa es otra. Y ahí está parte del problema. What I'm trying to say, what I was just saying in English at the food bank at least, and I'll let you answer on that. We're right now, the last couple months, it's over 50% of the food that we receive is fresh food. How much of that we actually have to push out the door versus people wanting to take it? That's the issue. Because the food is there, the fresh produce is there. It takes a lot more than just having availability. It's education. It's understanding why that's important. It's also more complicated food to eat and to cook, and helping in that area is also important.
I agree with you. Food literacy is really at the top of my list in creating a healthy food movement, pun intended. So in creating a healthy food movement, you have to teach people how to actually use what you're giving them. Some of the kind of low-hanging fruit, pun intended, adaptation is offering recipes. So if you're going to provide arugula, bok choy, asparagus, whatever it is, giving them little recipe cards. And I think one of my challenges in food banking is kind of like the food is donated, but also providing like the spices and maybe olive oil, like the whole thing so they can make complete meals, right? Another thing that I would challenge is for us to really look upstream and look at the convening centers. And so I think schools are a really good place, like the farm to table and doing a lot of this education, community garden attached to the schools. Because young people have a voice, and really they have license to influence the health and well-being of their families. And so I think really approaching it from the adult perspective and also from the child perspective, it'll be great to not have to rehabilitate our children from what they learn when they're young.
I think we're up with time, right? Yeah. So thank you, Rayna. Thank you so much for being in Puerto Rico, for teaching us about healthy habits. Thank you. And I'll leave it up to Andy.
I'm sorry. ¿Me oye ahora? Okay, you hear me? All right. I have a little bit of knowledge right now running nonprofits and as a business owner. So as a professional chef, I see all of those products that we're throwing away. It could be used as a value. Like we can make the product and have them with the product. Instead of just giving them like boxes of pantries, we could just make the product. But over here in Puerto Rico, one of the like issues is a kitchen where we can elaborate this product for the people. So this is like right now the issue in Puerto Rico, like where can we make this product for the people? Because we don't have access to that place either.
So I love this question. I really wish come find me after this too, and I'll give you my card. There's this organization that was started in Milwaukee called Upstart Kitchen. It's a shared commercial kitchen for chef entrepreneurs where they pay like a minimal fee, but it's an actual certified commercial kitchen where they can do batch cooking. They have high-tech equipment that usually the entrepreneurs couldn't afford on their own. They do a lot of technical assistance for their own businesses. They work with the local food banks to get excess food so it doesn't go to waste like a lot of that produce. They make healthy meals, and they work with the local hospital system to provide those meals to the patients in need. And so I think they get like $50,000, $125,000 grants. And so that money goes to those entrepreneurs, but they've formed this collaboration, this network that sustains the Upstart Kitchen. I was actually a member when I first got started as an independent. Yeah, so we should definitely talk.
All right, I'll do that.
Okay, thank you.
Bueno, qué interesante. Podríamos estar, yo creo que con ella hablando toda la mañana, realmente. Y aquí la pregunta es por dónde empezamos, ¿verdad? ¿Cómo empezamos a hacer todas estas colaboraciones? ¿Dónde es el punto de encuentro? ¿Dónde podemos encontrar esa cohesión para que todos podamos colaborar unos con otros?